You have no stop. There is no repeat. Welcome to Ambitions Abroad. My name is Scott.
And I'm Lauren, and today we're going to talk about taking our French language evaluation. Just like the civics exam, as of January 1st, 2026, there are new language requirements for folks like us who are applying for a pluriannual renewal in France. We already passed the civics exam, we did a whole video on that, but we were not actually sure if we were going to take a language exam for this renewal. Part of that comes from the fact that we thought, oh, we're just going to renew for a single year because we haven't heard anyone on our visas even getting the option to do a pluriannual renewal. So essentially we thought we would buy ourselves some time and say, okay, well, we don't need to do that. And then we found out we did need to do that.
So we didn't plan to take this test initially. At our monthly business meetup, our business coach, Valerie, recommended to us that we take this language test in addition to the other things that we were doing already for our visa renewal. The thought process being, if we apply for a pluriannual, it is possible to get the pluriannual, but it's also possible to get a single year. So we thought at the very least, we could apply for the pluriannual and at the very worst, maybe get a single year renewal.
The very worst would be getting no renewal, but at least if we applied for the pluriannual and only got a single year with our language and civics exam, so be it. But we have the opportunity to get up to 4 years.
After talking to Valerie on March 9th, we signed up for the first available test, which was on March 21st. For those counting, that's 12 days.
As a quick background, of course, on January 1st, 2026, the language evaluation requirements went up. Just like the civics exam that was brand new, January 1st, 2026, now folks who are applying for a multi-year pluriannual card have to get an A2 and have to have proof of an A2 level of French. The proof is the important part. For anyone who doesn't know, A1 is a complete beginner, A2 is pretty basic, B1 is getting into a little bit more intermediate, B2 is advanced intermediate, and then the C's are people who could actually get a job and work in France. This brings us back to the proof part. When you go to your original OFI appointment, or at least when we went to our OFI appointments, they gave us a really small evaluation on our language level. I didn't even know what was happening. I didn't know, whatever. Okay, it's not important. They give you a short evaluation and they give you an approximate level. And if you have zero French, like you can't respond at all, you have no idea what's going on, they will gently offer you required classes. But because Scott and I knew kind of what was going on, they just gave us an app and we're like, good luck.
Most people that we know also were given a recommendation of the app, which has been really helpful, and we talked about that in a couple of our shorts experiences with that. But only people who are truly in need of help, who truly speak absolutely or understand absolutely no French, may still get classes offered.
So basically, if you don't get offered those classes or don't get access to those classes, you are kind of on your own with the app and then figuring out other resources to help you acquire more French. From what we understand, there are 2 tests that the prefecture will accept, which is the DELF, the most common one that you hear about. It's evaluation langue française, I think, something like that. Diplôme is the D in DELF, by the way.
So we could put the acronym above us.
Okay. And then the other test is the TEF-IRN, which the IRN stands for Integration, Residence, and Nationality. There are several other versions of the TEF, and you'll often hear it called the TCF, which is out of Canada, but the TEF-IRN specifically meet this requirement. The first available test in our area was the TEF-IRN. We could have taken the DELF, like we mentioned, but it was not available, and we were going for first available test, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it will count towards our renewal. It's important to note the distinction between the DELF and the TEF. The DELF is forever. It doesn't expire. It is, again, like I mentioned, a diploma of the language, so it counts as a comprehensive, lasts forever, no expiration date. The TEF, on the other hand, is good for 2 years. So you can present it with your dossier to reapply for your pluriannual cart. But if you do it again, if you need to reapply again, you will need to take either the TEF again or something like the DELF where you don't have to be evaluated ever again on the language.
Another convenient thing for us, despite this crazy timeline, was that the test location and the people administering the test were the exact same people as the civics exam. So if we were to point out one positive, it would be that we registered for this test pretty much the exact same way that we did for the civics exam. The people who were administering the test was the exact same organization. And so navigating that website and signing up was fairly easy. So before taking this test, I would say that the way that we studied was a little bit different. I've been taking online classes with the tutor twice a week for an hour each time. Shout out to italki, which you could find at the link below. In addition to italki, I was previously using a couple of language learning apps, but to be honest, I had kind of slacked a little bit in the past couple months because of the amount of things that we've been doing. Additionally, I have had a fair amount of immersion through doing my adult art club events, as well as going to the store and talking to our French friends.
Admittedly, I have not been studying at all. Some of you may have seen the shorts that I've posted about speaking bad French, but quite literally the only way that I have been practicing French is out in the real world, engaging with people, going shopping. I do a lot of perfume browsing, so going up to expensive perfume counters and talking to people who work there. Previously, as Scott said, we were using language learning apps, Duolingo being one of them, but I pretty much dropped that as soon as we got here. The French government gave us the Frello app. I used that for a couple months, stopped using that. We have books that are basically collecting dust in our house. Yeah, I have not been doing any official studying. For a little bit of background, 18 years ago, I did take French classes in high school, but they were in an American high school, a United States high school, public high school. So, draw your own conclusions about the effectiveness of that language class. And then I guess really the only other way that I have been engaging with French material since arriving here, besides like out in the real world with our French friends, etc., is through media. So sometimes through YouTube videos, intentionally through YouTube videos, but also sometimes through TikToks and getting on the French side of TikTok and listening to people speaking French, occasionally watching French TV shows or movies, but that's really the extent of the studying that I have done in almost a year.
I was just going to say, as Lauren was talking about the other ways that she's learning, it's kind of jogged my memory a little bit as to other ways that I've been learning that maybe weren't in a structured sense learning the language, but in a passive sense, watching YouTube videos, as she mentioned. Also doing a fair amount of Translate. And although, things like Google Translate or other translation apps are not 100% accurate all the time, it still does kind of change how you interact with people and the way that you speak, and are able to see at least what verbs mean what, and to see the definitions for words in French and in English at the same time.
I think one final way that we have been acquiring the language outside of studying for this test, which we'll get into, is we go to like a lot of museums and galleries and we read the descriptions of the art and of the work in French most of the time. Sometimes because it's the only option, but most of the time because we choose to read the French version and get exposure to sentence structure. I know that sounds silly, but I feel like that's really like the biggest place we've been reading is through our like cultural experiences like that.
That and boulangeries.
The actual website where you register for the TEF-IRN has a lot of great resources. There's actually like a study group you can get into. There's a study guide that you can purchase. There are practice tests. We didn't have time for that. We had 12 days, so we did not actually use any of that stuff, but they do have short videos on the kind of vibe that the test is gonna get and the sections that the test will involve. Luckily for us, because we had never even heard of this test before registering for it, it really was pretty close to what was described, so we were not completely taken off guard when we went into the actual test.
I would just say, unlike the civics exam that we took, where we could study for a majority of the questions, but there was a lot of more open-ended things that were situational, with this test, it was pretty straightforward. The things that you saw that were on the website were the things that you were tested on for the most part.
The sections that were represented and presented were exactly the same as they were online. The actual material within those sections is different. So it is still a mystery on the parts of the test you're going to read, the things that you're going to have to listen to, the questions you're going to be asked to speak about. Those are still a mystery, but the actual way that the test was laid out was pretty spot on for what we read online.
As far as the time crunch goes, I did ask my tutor to adjust our lessons a little bit and make them more in alignment with how the TEF is structured, which was helpful. Although I think we ended up getting maybe 3 lessons out of that in the time frame that we had, but helpful nonetheless. And in addition to that, I also watched a fair amount of YouTube videos. There were a couple of accounts, specifically French with Alexa. I want to shout out French with Alexa. It's super helpful, especially when it comes to learning like the nuances and how certain words change. Obviously, you have masculine, feminine, but also singular and plural, if words end in vowels. Lots of the minutia that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but are definitely going to be looked at when you're being evaluated for your comprehension.
We were absolutely watching a ton of YouTube videos leading up to this test. I also just got out a notebook and started writing down as many sentences as I possibly could, like about myself in French, just like thinking about tenses and all of that. I know this sounds very silly, but this was straight up tapping into the like high school version of myself who had to do any of this stuff. So haven't had to write very much in French since then, but just got out a notebook, started writing down as much as I could, looking up translations, making sure that I was getting the actual subject matter covered. And yeah, and then like kind of a lot of crying and having anxiety that was also involved.
I think under any normal circumstances, there would have been a fair amount of pressure on taking this test. But again, we can't stress enough, the time crunch for something that we didn't think that we were initially going to have to do was a little bit stressful.
And it was actually a little bit expensive. So the other thing was that like I was stressed out that we were both going to take this test and not pass this test and have spent $400 basically. Like it was like 100. It was like 180 euro.
180 per test.
180 euro. So yeah. Yeah, it was a lot.
So our test day was on a Saturday, and I just want to start out by saying, in addition to the time thing, which we've already mentioned at length, I was a little bit annoyed because of one, I had a workshop planned for that day, which of course you couldn't really plan for. This is significantly more important because it's in reference to us being in France. But additionally, the test itself was not until 4:40 in the afternoon. And I'm not sure how you operate, but I tend to do my best work in the morning when I've just gotten up and I've had my coffee. So I was already kind of dreading this experience because of how late the test was.
We got to the test center. We recognized it because it's where we took our civics test, which did bring a little bit of comfort to me, honestly. And it was actually the same people proctoring the test, which also brought some comfort to me. I don't know why. We only saw these people for like 15 minutes a couple months ago. They just start you out right away. You sit down, they make sure that the computer is correct for you, you're registered, all of that, and you just jump right into it. The section that we started with was the writing section. So that's called written expression. We look down. It is not not the keyboard that we are used to at all. It's not, a QWERTY keyboard is what we use in the United States, right? And this is an AZERTY. Yeah. I don't know the name either, but it was that one. It was the one that we are not used to. So that automatically just kind of like, okay, let's go. Let's get started. The first writing section includes 2 different scenarios. One is a casual one, writing to a friend, like a tutoyer, and you have 10 minutes to... Scott and I are going back and forth between 40 and 60 words.
It was 40 words.
I think you're correct that it was 40 words. They do have a word count on there, which is quite nice. You have 10 minutes to write a message to a friend, 40 words minimum. The next section, you have 20 minutes, and mine was like a job, almost like a job application. I was replying to like someone looking for someone to do a job. So that's going to be a little bit more professional. And that matters for the tenses that you use. That matters for everything like that. And you had to write 100 words.
I also want to say that adding to the anxiety that's being felt while you're taking this and figuring out a new keyboard in real time is that once the time starts for all of these sections, it just keeps going. So there is no stop. There is no go back. After the written part, after the time runs out, the screen automatically goes to the next thing, and there you are again. You have to continue writing for this next prompt. As Lauren mentioned, the first prompt was in reference to writing to a friend. And again, that situation could change. I think
We didn't have the same situation.
I think the situation could be a friend recently moved and you're kind of asking them how it was going or how your move was or where you moved to. Similarly with work, if they got a new job, asking them what their job was. So you're really trying to like investigate and show your knowledge of the language by how you would actually talk to somebody who is French. As Lauren mentioned also, the second one was a little bit more formal. For that one, I thought it was a little bit more challenging because for this one, you were trying to respond to a call for work of some kind. I forget which one you got.
Scott wants me to say my exact scenario. My exact scenario was I was responding to someone looking for an adult to chaperone teenage kids going abroad for 2 weeks. So I had to respond to why I would be a good candidate for chaperoning teenage kids on a international trip. I wouldn't, but anyway.
And my scenario was applying to be a dog walker for someplace in the neighborhood. And initially that sounds easy enough, but for somebody like myself who has a little bit of a hard time with things that are not tangible, that are not visual, coming up with a scenario as to why I would be a good candidate to walk dogs when I haven't owned a dog in probably 10 or 15 years at this point, was a little difficult. As you've seen on this channel, we are both adamant cat lovers, so I've kind of switched my brain over into that.
Before we go any further, it is very important to note that this test was the least neurodivergent friendly situation we have ever been in. The bad lighting, the fact that there's no stopping anything, the keyboard, it was truly neurodivergent hell. So when Scott talks about this, I feel like he's having a little bit of a flashback, to that moment. It is very hard for some people to make up scenarios. It was even difficult for me because when your language is limited, it's hard to just go into this abstract thinking because I don't have enough language to think in an abstract way.
If I am to give one positive to this particular part of the test, I will say that because we didn't know all the different codes or whatever to enter for the accents for certain letters, there was a selection of buttons that you could click from. So that was helpful, but it was a little bit distracting considering if you want to be specific and again show your knowledge of the word and spell it correctly, how it's supposed to be spelled in French, it took a little bit of time. And for that, it was a little bit distracting going back and forth and trying to remember what the accents were and then also stopping and starting what you were typing, moving the mouse, clicking on the single letter, going back, typing.
And this is the main difference between Scott and I. One of the many differences between Scott and I is that I did not care. I didn't put an accent on a single thing until I wrote the entire message out. And then I went back and started trying to remember where the accents were. Because to me, it was more important to show that I could get the basic idea out of my head than if I know the exact correct accents. Was that important? I'm sure it's important, but I was like, no, I need to have something written down before we move on, before this 10 minutes runs out.
And yes, of course, if I were to take the test again, I definitely would have done it her way. The next section of the test was written comprehension. And for this, it was your pretty standard multiple choice. You were given a question about a scenario. In some cases, it involved looking at a document like a bill, maybe a flyer for an upcoming event, and then getting a question about that document and trying to answer it from 4 options. This part I feel like was pretty straightforward of all of the parts, especially because it really relied on your comprehension and your knowledge of the different words in French.
I can't remember exactly. Scott thinks that there were some that were multiple choice based on a picture, like a small graphic or like a little cartoon. I can't remember if that was on mine or if I'm just remembering that from the practice exam. But either way, there were 2 written comprehension sections and they were about 15 minutes each. There were 2 written comprehension sections. You could tell, well, after we left, we could tell. You could tell that the first section was the easier of the 2. The second section, by the end of it, there were some things where I was like, I'm absolutely guessing. I'm absolutely guessing. But they really encourage you to guess. They encourage you to fill in every single answer because why not? You're not going to get it right if you don't try.
Just like any kind of standardized testing, you obviously get a point if you get an answer correct, but you get no points if you get an answer wrong, and you get no points if you don't guess anything. So can't hurt. So the next section I think was the most mentally demanding, which was the oral comprehension. For this section, you were supposed to put on a set of headphones.
So we had to listen to someone speak, and then we had to select from a multiple choice list. This, again, this was mentally draining for both of us in different ways. Putting on community headphones was already a no for me, okay? That was already sending me to the moon. After these two other sections that we had been to, picking up and putting on community headphones made me want to leave that test. It's a personal thing. But they play a section for you, so the question populates. It's just like A through D selection. You can read those. You get 6 seconds. You can ask me how I know, because I was looking and counting based on the timer that was going. You get 6 seconds to read those 4 options. They play some kind of announcement or conversation that is 10 seconds to up to like a minute and a half. And then you have 10 seconds to respond based on what you heard.
Part of the reason that this was so mentally draining was because after each question, there was no pause, there was no going back. They just started the next one. So if you were still kind of thinking about the previous question and weren't quite ready for it, or I don't know, for whatever reason, you were still reading the question that was being asked of you for the next one, and the audio started playing, you were out of luck. I think also this section was the most draining because in addition to having it in such wide range of times and having it be not just comprehension, but also the audio part, it was pretty long. I would say this section was maybe 30 questions.
It was a long time.
Yeah, so it was a fair amount of time, and this is, again, after you've already written to 2 different people for approximately a half an hour, after you've done your comprehension of different images and different things like that for a half an hour. Now you're going to something that's incorporating both, and you have no stop. There is no repeat.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was the fact that it was just like a fire hose of information coming at you. And yeah, you could not stop the audio. You could not repeat the audio, which, for Scott is quite difficult because he needs things repeated to him multiple times to even know what's going on in English. So I was quite worried.
After this section was the part that was my most dreaded. I'm assuming, I guess it was Lauren's as well. Although Lauren, well, we'll talk about Lauren in a second. It was the most dreaded part for the both of us, and that's the spoken part. So for this part, you are showing that you can actually speak the language, and you are answering 2 series of questions. For the first scenario, the test proctor is role-playing the role of someone working for a service company, so like electric, or in this case, cell phone. For me, I got a cell phone company. And the idea was that I was trying to change my bill or trying to change my service. It was a little unclear, but I just personally, I completely blanked out. I knew more words than I was able to say, for sure. But in addition to that, the role-playing aspect, after having done all these other 3 different components, so these 3 different parts of the test, it was just a lot for me. And I think if we had had a break, maybe in between, or if the flow wasn't the same as it had been with having all those oral questions before, it may have been a little bit easier, but I'll be honest, I just choked.
I was still dreading this part, even though Scott would like to say that he didn't think I was dreading it based on what he heard coming out of the little room that we were sequestered in. They take you into a private room to do this. Thankfully, you are not doing your exam in front of other people so that they can point and laugh at you when you don't know what to say. They do record it. The sections are approximately 5 minutes that you're supposed to be able to speak about these things. In my case, I was supposed to be asking about how to enroll my child in summer camp, my child that I don't have. And again, the first scenario is meant to be a more formal thing. So I'm speaking to someone that I don't know in a more professional setting. I'm using vous and vous voyez, which is important to know. You don't want to be calling up like, hey man, how can I enroll my kid? Like, no, you want to be a little bit more formal. And they give you a little sheet of paper with your scenario on it, and it has some prompts. Like mine had like a little swimming icon and a little bus and all those things to try to help you come up with questions to ask the person on the other side. Scott completely forgot what his second one was, probably because he was having a full-blown mental breakdown.
So for my second one, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, the scenario was trying to help a friend decide between taking a sport or taking an activity that was indoors versus outdoors. At least that's how I understood it.
Yes. The second one is always a negotiation.
Right. So there was a little bit more pushback with the second scenario, or a little bit more of a, well, I do like this, but what about this? And in that case, again, you're trying to give your knowledge. And again, after the test, I probably could have given 10 different responses, but at that point I was so mentally drained, I couldn't come up with anything.
The second scenario is, again, a less formal, you're speaking with your friend, but you are going to argue with them, which is very French, right? Like they want you to argue your side. They want, they want you to stand your ground and take a side. So it's really important in this scenario that you pick something and you defend it. It's not, oh, well, you could do either. No, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear you actually defend the topic that you select. For mine, my friend was asking, should they go to the countryside or to the sea for their vacation? I argued for the sea because we're near the sea. We went back and forth. This was the scenario that definitely lasted a little bit longer. And for anyone who's completely worried about blanking, there were some words that I completely forgot in French, and I just said them in English with a French accent. And then the person who was giving me the test just presented that word in French to me, and I said, oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. So they're not here to see you fail. They want you to do well. It's extremely intimidating. They know it's intimidating. The person who was giving the test was really kind and really patient, but it was funny because I was just like, I'm going to just say this word with a little bit of an accent and see what happens, because what if it's right?
And to that end, I would say, yeah, it definitely helps to have a little bit of confidence, even if you're unsure about what it is that you're actually saying, or if you did it positively versus negatively, or you meant to say something, you meant something else. But having that extra little bit of confidence, it was very similar to an interview, to be honest. It was.
Which you also don't like.
Yeah, I do not like interviews at all. But again, just like an interview, it's not an indication of your actual skill, your actual ability. It is very much in that moment. Here's how you're going to answer the question, and what advice can you give to this person?
Okay, I just finished my whole exam. It sounds like, once again, that I'm finishing early, but it was only one person doing the spoken part of it, so we couldn't go in at the same time. So Scott should be out in about 10 minutes. I feel like I could have done better, but I was just so nervous. The actual test, I think there were some questions in there that were above the level that we were testing for, just to throw you off, but it is what it is. But yeah, I was really nervous. Overall, I think it went okay. Again, I just have no idea this is going to be weighted. I don't understand, there was a little bit of me being sassy and being able to sass my way through the interview part. I still don't know if it would count for what we're looking for, but it's over now, and I'm keeping my fingers and toes crossed for my husband, because bless him, but even in English, it takes him a long time to get his thoughts out, okay? So I hope he can take some deep breaths and really pull his vocabulary together, because I know he understands, but him being able to communicate, again, even in English, is sometimes,
So after the test, Lauren and I both talked outside. We walked around a little bit. We were both kind of in a daze, to be honest, after going through all of those different sections. And I think it was also pretty much nighttime at that point. The sun had gone down.
Definitely 7-something.
It was a little disorienting, to be honest. We debriefed. We talked about how our sections were different, as we just mentioned to you, talked about what we had for each question. And after that, we just kind of walked around, because I was feeling a little bit down on myself, I'll be honest. The spoken part, after the written and the oral comprehension, I wasn't feeling as confident in my ability. As we were doing that, we walked around, we decided we were going to get food, we were going to get takeout for that night as a celebration and kind of congratulations to ourselves. And as we were doing that, we ran into another friend who is here on a different visa, but is also from the United States and had recently been going through their own visa renewal issues as well.
I think running into a friend, particularly a friend who's also from the United States, who has recently taken the exam, they are fully proficient in French. They have a French degree, but still they had to take an exam. They had to do all of that. It completely helped us decompress. I think if we would have gone home, we would have been really bummed out if we would have just gone straight home. So running into this person, talking, and also talking about other things, talking about what we have going on in our life, what's going well, how we're enjoying ourselves, what food we're ordering, what they've been eating, just all those things really helped us decompress. And when we got home, I felt like we were in a better place than just focusing on the test, because there had been so much focus on taking the test the few days leading up to it, in addition to doing our full-time job. After the test, we got Lebanese food and we watched The Lion King, and we didn't really talk about the test anymore at all.
Just like the civics exam, the results for this test were supposed to take between 2 to 3 weeks after, and they didn't. They actually came significantly sooner than we initially thought they would. Just like the civics exam, we ended up getting them about 4 or 5 days after we had taken the test. And your results are average based on how you did for each of the 4 sections. We are going to read our scores for each section to you and then tell you what they averaged out to. For the written expression section, I surprisingly got an A2.
And for the written expression section, I got a B1.
For oral comprehension, I got a B1.
For oral comprehension, I also got a B1.
For written expression, I got an A2.
For written expression, I got a B1.
And for oral expression, I got an A1.
For oral expression, I got a B1. So if you were keeping track, those average out for me to a B1, which is a level higher than I needed to get to pass this test.
And for me, I got an A2.
Which is the exact level you needed.
Which is the exact level I needed. And I did feel a little bit better about how close I got to getting B1, although it was still A2 for the 2 sections I got A2 for. So that is to say, we both got the results that we were looking for, in Lauren's case, a little bit better. And we are now going to be adding this to our dossier for our visa renewal.
I think my biggest takeaway from this test is don't listen to me at all. You should actually study for this test and know what's going to be on it before going into it, because it would have saved me 12-ish days of horrible anxiety and not knowing what to expect. Once I was in the testing center, I turned into test mode Lauren, and he was laughing because he heard me in that room like giggling and talking to the test proctor. But yeah, that I was still nervous and I still was unsure of how I would rank in this test. Highly recommend looking up the test that you're looking to study for, if it's the DELF or if it's this TEF, and making sure that you know what is involved and taking your time in studying it, getting a little more comfortable, maybe using a keyboard that has the accents on there to make you a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, I would say for the recommendations for this test, or whether you're taking the TEF or the DELF, definitely use the website that is given to you by the people who are administering the test. Again, everything that was on the website was mentioned in slightly different ways, but still it was mentioned in the same general format. I would also say, as someone who finds it hard to come up with scenarios, it may be good to kind of role play with a friend, with your spouse, in order to give you a little bit of pressure so that you are forced to speak in French and respond in French. And of course, make sure you give yourself enough time, not 12 days before you're going to be taking your test, to start studying. That wraps it up for this video. We hope that that is giving you a little bit of an idea of what to expect for your language evaluations, specifically the TEF. We are happy with our results. We are going to be adding these results to our dossier in hopes that we get a multi-year pluriannual renewal. If you have any questions about this evaluation or taking French language exams, or your own experience about going through this process, feel free to leave those in the comments below. And hopefully the next time that we talk to you, we'll be speaking about our visa renewal.
Hopefully the next time we talk to you, we are still in France. Anyway, love you so much. Bye.